Well, hi and welcome back to a boat called Wanda. So this is the last update that I can do for quite some time, probably about 2 months hopefully, and then I'll be back here. I've been getting quite anxious and stressed on how much I can get done before I leave, and I guess I just have to sort of let it go and accept that I can do what I can do and no more. Initially I was hoping to get some paint on. That would have been a great milestone before I went, but that's not going to happen. I think at this stage though I should be able to get at least all the priming done, and that's not so bad. I can just have the primer set for a good 2 months and then come back and sand it back and paint it. So anyway, let's get started. So here we have the full range of paint and painting accoutrements ready to go to paint the deck. Now this took a lot longer than painting the top sides. The reason being the deck took quite a lot of work with the paint to try and force the paint into the weave of the fabric. In some places the weave was completely filled up with epoxy, and when the pill ply was set that did a really nice job. And other places like this, some of the weave was left, and so that creates a pattern that needs to be filled up. And it took quite some effort to get the primer to fill up that pattern. And this is the end of quite a long day actually, getting the primer on the deck. One thing that I do have some concerns over is the thickness of the material that I've made up here for the mast step. When I took this board away last week, I did notice that the depth of the material that I've built up is a little bit higher than I thought. I thought I'd end up with about 4 millimeters, but as you can see here, it's probably more likely to be 6 or 7 millimeters. Now, I'd always expected to have about 4 millimeters once I'd finished sort of fairing this back. So this is actually a little bit higher than I thought. I've always thought about the risks of building up too much material and cracking at the back of my mind. Mind you, this is one part of the deck that shouldn't be flexing or moving at all because there's the compression post underneath. And in fact there was already about 5 millimeters of gel coat around this area, and that had only cracked where the mast base had pushed down into the plywood, so it doesn't really show any signs of movement around here. But anyway, I found that there's plenty of room for this mast base now, and that this actually sits down by a couple of millimeters, and that means that I can afford to probably sand back a further 2 or 3 millimeters of this fairing material just to reduce the thickness to prevent any risk of cracking. But what's been holding me back from doing that is I'm just so happy with the finish I've got. The shape is just perfect, and I'm worried that as soon as I start sanding it back I'm going to lose this really nice shape. So to prevent that, I've got myself a smaller flexible sanding board, which is small enough to use this space here because the working area is a little bit tighter. So I'm hoping that if I sand it back with this and I do it carefully, I can keep the same good shape and maybe take off another 2 millimeters just to reduce the thickness a little bit. So I think what I'll do is clean off this board and put this back. I'll just sit it here, I don't need to glue it down, and that should help the sanding board from just sort of rounding off the edges too much and keep the shape. Okay, so let's get on with that then.
Final call to fly
Well, I'm finally ready to bed this mast step down, and this has been another epic project. Anyway, so here I've got the mast step. I've put some blue tack around the edge to give it a little bit more width. I've taped it up with non-stick packing tape. I've sprayed it with this wax release spray to make sure that it doesn't get stuck in there. I've got everything set up here ready to go. I've got my inclinometer to make sure that it's sit down level. I've got my laser line here to strike the center line so I can position it. I've got my thickened epoxy, which is 404, using the 404 high density filler, because this needs to be very, very strong stuff. There's going to be a lot of compression between the top skin there and the mast step. So all ready to go. Actually, I need gloves. Back in a minute. Right, so first step, get my laser switched on, fire up the laser beam. Don't know if you can see it, but there's my red line there. Not sure how much to put on. Just start with this and see what happens. So let's start with this. I can take it off if I put too much down. I guess the question is, where is most of it going to be? Probably not on the sides. So I'll bring that back in. Now, this is one of those things that you can't really get right. You just got to press and hope for the best. So that's what I'm going to do without further ado. Get it nice and centered. Push it down. Okay, let's see. Yeah, we're good that way. Sideways. Oh, perfect. Just need to try and tidy this up a bit. Now I might have to cheat a bit and put some fairing compound in here. Because this stuff isn't going to fare very well at all. I am so very pleased with myself at this stage. Okay, well I'm back, and this time I've got some low density filler to just plug up the gaps a little bit. And that is bang on. Right, so there's just one thing I need to do now. Right, this should just hold it in position and stop it from moving as everything sets, because I've had this happen in the past. I've bedded something down, left it, and overnight it sort of moved. So this is how I've spent the last 3 days, just constant detailed sanding, looking for any parts of the gloss that are still shiny, because I need to get that shine off to make it nice and dull for the primer to stick to. Looking for any little dings or knocks that need a little bit of filler to fill up. Opening up any little cracks found that have been overlooked previously and putting some filler in them. And this has been a very time-consuming process. But this is the very last day and I'm in the final touches of sanding down the coach roof, and I should be able to get primer on later today. Okay, so here we are at the end of my week, and I've got quite a bit of primer on the boat. I've got all of the coach roof has just got one coat. The deck has got 2 coats and needs another 2 more. All of the cockpit has got its first coat on, and the coamings have got a first coat on, so they'll need a couple more. So as you can see, I'm getting there. It's a little bit overwhelming because I think of all the effort and amount of work and amount of time I've spent getting this far, and getting the primer on is a massive achievement, but I'm just looking at it and realising it's going to take a bloody long time to knock back all that primer, which is what you have to do. You basically sand it all off. And particularly on the deck here, you might be able to see that it's a pretty rough looking texture there. That is quite uneven, and it's because this primer is so thick. You're meant to put it on thick. So unfortunately I'm going to have to leave the update at this point, and I've got 3 coats of primer on the deck and 2 on the cockpit, so I'm almost there. I just need 1 more coat on the deck and 1 more on the cockpit, and maybe if I talk nicely to Rob, he'll be kind enough to do that for me whilst I'm away. So this is it. I'm heading off to Australia tomorrow, so I'm just packing up in the boatyard today, and unfortunately I have to let go of the project, and it's really tough because the last week we've made so much progress. All of that sanding, hours and hours and hours of sanding and preparation, filling and fairing, that's all done. And getting that primer down just is a great feeling because I can really see that I'm almost there. So it is hard to put the project down at this point and not just get to the next part, but hey ho, that's what I have to do. So if you are enjoying these videos, make sure you subscribe, and then you'll get an alert when I'm back online, because at the moment I'm not sure when the next update is going to be. Hopefully in two or so months. Now I'd like to go out on a high note and share some very good news that I've got. So I just shot this the other day, and finally I've got some good news. I've got a piece of Wanda that's serviceable, that doesn't need to be completely pulled apart and rebuilt. And this is going to make the future project very much easier. So thanks very much for watching. I hope you enjoyed it up to now. It's not over, I'll continue again, and I'll see you back online at some point in the future. Take care and see you next time. That's great.